Welcome to The Authority On, a podcast brought to you by Device Authority. Hello and welcome to this episode of The Authority On. Today I am joined by Grace Cassy, co-founder of CyLon Ventures, board member at 1011, one of Fortune's leading investors in cybersecurity. Grace has also served as an external expert on the UK's 2025 Strategic Defence Review, one of the most ambitious and future-focused updates to national security in decades. Today we'll be discussing what this review means for cyber resilience, critical national infrastructure, and the UK's evolving approach to digital threats. And as always, we'll be bringing in a Device Authority lens, connecting the strategic vision with the practical steps needed to secure connected devices, identity, and data across complex ecosystems. Hello, Grace, and welcome. It's great to have you on.
Thank you so much for having me.
So let's start with the review itself. You had a front row seat as an external expert. What stood out most to you from this route to branch rethink of defence?
Well, I think the first thing I would say is that this was the first time that a strategic defence review had been conducted externally. So typically these reviews in the past have been conducted by defence on themselves. And this time the Labour government appointed an external team to really take a look from the outside. And so that, I think, has given us a kind of different perspective. We obviously worked extremely closely with people across defence in the process of conducting the review. We also had a very, very deep and broad external consultation. We sought input from private citizens, from serving members of the Defence Forces, from veterans, from the private sector, from academia and think tanks and so on. So we had a huge amount of input, and I think that has enabled us to really, I hope, give the most rounded and holistic sense of how defence needs to change in the future. As to the themes of the report itself, I think one of the really key ones is around how defence must innovate in future. The nature of the threats that we face in the UK have been made more evident really since Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and how that campaign has developed, how that campaign has been fought, right? The very visible use of drones, the use of the electromagnetic spectrum, the use of cyber as a tool in concert with more conventional types of warfare, have really brought home that modern war looks quite different to what our defence system has been set up for hitherto. So, we've looked very thoroughly and carefully at how the UK must be able to endure both above and below the threshold of war in future. And that, of course, has quite a significant focus on resilience, and cyber being an important part of that. I'm someone who spent a long time, investing in cyber, so it's something I obviously care about a great deal, and I'm encouraged to see the focus in the review on that aspect. Obviously the stuff that grabs the headlines is often around the submarines and the nuclear warheads and so on, all of which are of course vital, but I think it's important that we looked more holistically at other aspects of how the UK is likely to confront adversaries in future, and that sub-threshold area, I think, is just as important.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Like you said, Russia has shown a lot of ingenuity when it comes to utilising cyber attacks throughout this conflict. Digital dependence generally as well, and how we operating our critical national infrastructure even means that those dynamic threats and our digital dependency are more concerning, aren't they? It's exactly what we're sort of hearing from our partners around securing IoT devices and operational systems. And that the emphasis around cyber as a warfaring domain feels like a long overdue recognition of how that digital trust has become so key. And that really now takes us through into talking about critical national infrastructure, from like energy to healthcare to defence supply chains. And the review calls for real investment in resilience, doesn't it? What exactly does that look like in practice?
Yeah, we definitely call for a greater focus on resilience. The review talks about things like building up, strengthening our cadet forces, trying to rebuild connections between the armed forces and society through education and skills and so on, all of which is hugely important. I think, though, for your audience, it's probably the focus on CNI and how technical infrastructure can be better protected is another area of significant focus for us. We make a specific recommendation around giving greater focus to ensuring that our CNI is protected, as I say, both above and below the threshold of war. We seek further work on that. An important part of that is partnership between the public sector and the private sector. Much of modern CNI is owned and operated by the private sector. And this is not the days anymore where CNI was entirely a public good, if you like. It is public good, but it's not publicly owned and controlled anymore. Some of it is. But if we're to really build our trust across our modern CNI, that does require a different relationship with the private sector. And it becomes more and more urgent as we see day by day, as you say, our dependence on our digital CNI is extreme, right? 95% plus of our data flowing through undersea cables, energy pipelines, even systemically significant companies for us. If you think about the cloud providers and so on, that these are, their resilience is our resilience, and ensuring trust across that system between public and private is something that we, very much want to see enhanced.
One of the things that we're really seeing from our side is the push to sort of automate device trust and credential management within those critical sectors. Even the Colonial Pipeline attack as well, it went to go and show just how susceptible critical infrastructure could be to attack. So making sure that the credential management is looked after within those areas is so important, and obviously not optional anymore. If a water utility or defence contractor couldn't rotate certificates or verify device identity automatically, then they're exposed. And resilience now means being able to enforce trust dynamically and at scale. When we think about how tiny a little sensor on a production line is and how many there are, how vast they are throughout the production line, and they're all single points of entry as well, which is quite scary when you think about it. But it just goes to show again how important that is, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. And I think what we all see quite clearly through recent years, both in the context of Ukraine and just in the context of daily life, is the sheer mass of devices that are now being deployed and networked and operated on a daily basis. That the scale of that really requires automation in order to manage effectively, and the pace at which we need to understand the data coming off those devices and act upon it, again, is such that old systems are not really suitable anymore. So, innovative solutions to enable the best, fastest use and sort of trusted understanding of the data on those devices at scale is important for sure.
Your deeply involved in the venture world, funding the next generation of security solutions. Where do you see the biggest shifts happening?
Gosh, there's a lot of interesting areas. I think the most obvious one, which people obviously talk a lot about, is the collision of AI and security.
Yeah.
It's been a theme in the security industry for some time now, of course, but perhaps marketing of AI has become even more noisy in the last year or so. But
Definitely.
I think beneath the noise, I think there are some genuinely interesting shifts. I think the development and deployment of various types of agentic AI in security is an important theme to watch. It's early days still, and there are still legitimate concerns among users around trusting agents to conduct any sort of unsupervised tasks. But I think what we're seeing at the cutting edge is that these agents are very powerful and can, with the right controls around them, really take a lot of load off overworked security teams. And
Yep.
if one can automate much of the more basic work, whether that be in processing vulnerabilities or managing identities, or any other process in a security program, then it does offer the prospect of freeing up time for people to focus on more complex, higher value tasks. So, I think that agentic AI theme is a really interesting one to watch, both the use of it and the oversight and control of it. In both areas, there are innovators doing very interesting work. I think from a kind of policy perspective, various governments are still looking quite hard at how to make software and systems more secure by design, so that we're building in security at an earlier stage rather than trying to apply it as a retrospective patch later.
Yeah.
And I think there's some, again, interesting companies applying various forms of automation and AI to that challenge, to help, as particularly as things like coding becomes more easy for the non-expert to achieve, right? Tooling that makes vibe coding, as it's called, that does need to be secure too. So ensuring that innovators keep security in mind and providing good low friction products to enable that to happen, I think is another really interesting area.
Based on what we've been talking about, what really resonates with us as a company around AI, and we've been looking at our own AI product, although I suppose it really falls more within the machine learning space, as it were, which helps to identify vulnerabilities based on the SBOM and then quarantining that device so that if it's not got the right certificate, or even if it is running a slightly different operating system to the rest of the network, it can then be quarantined for review so that nothing terrible can spread throughout the network while you're waiting for the human element to notice the notification, then sort it out, which can take time, because when you're looking after vast networks of devices, even traditional IT devices, it can take some time to locate that device and then have a proper look at it and sort it all out. So
yeah, that's right. I think vulnerability management as a theme is a really interesting one that's quite susceptible to AI as a tool. I think the sheer scale of vulnerabilities that exist out there and the number of systems and devices that we're deploying around the economy are such that, as you say, it's pretty, impossible really for humans to keep on top of that in the time frame that keeps people safe. So
yeah.
I think the application of machine learning, AI, automation to that challenge is a very interesting use case.
Going back to the CNI side of things, looking after edge and leaf devices, those devices that are not necessarily on the network or constantly connected to the network, like a wind turbine in the middle of a field thousands of miles away. Again, they can be looked at and addressed prior to someone being able to fly out and go and look at that device. So things like that can help vastly reduce issues on a network like that, which is really interesting from our perspective as well, seeing what other people within the market are producing around those as well, which is it's exciting times, isn't it? Yeah. You've worked across diplomacy and national security. How important is cross-border cooperation between public-private partnerships and in this space?
Well, I think it's central. One of our core messages in the Strategic Defence Review is around necessity to build a different kind of partnership between defence and the private sector. I think our armed forces are only as strong as the industry that stands behind them. Our CNI is only as strong as the industry that stands behind it. And I think government increasingly recognises that. And in the SDR government has accepted our recommendations that we need to build a different kind of partnership with the private sector, that we need to move on from defence industry being considered to be a very small number of very large companies that operate in a fairly closed system, and understand that there are a far wider set of potential suppliers out there working across a wide variety of technology and service areas who can support defence and security missions. So, I think it's sort of hard to underestimate, to be honest, that the cooperation element here to achieve the vision that we're setting out. And I think outside of the kind of pure commercial space of working with different kinds of suppliers, I think there's also a great emphasis on other sorts of cooperation and sharing, like shared framework, shared standards, enabling us to work better with our allies. So we've been very clear in our review that this is a NATO first review. We are explicitly prioritizing NATO as our core partnership. That means that we need to be able to work with our NATO allies and interoperate with our NATO allies. So we need to be working off shared standards, whether that's in communications or land systems or air systems or cyber. So I think the ability to work across border effectively places even greater emphasis on kind of single shared frameworks that enable that to happen.
That cohesion is so important, making sure everything works well together. And one final thought: when you look ahead, what gives you optimism in cybersecurity and strategic resilience?
I think there's a few reasons to be optimistic. I spend my time around innovators, and a few days spending time with founders of interesting cutting edge technology companies does give you optimism about the quality and the commitment of those people to solving some of these challenges. There's no doubt that we've got some big challenges. We have very effective, well-armed adversaries, both in conventional and unconventional warfare terms. But we have really, really great people too. We have effective defence and security forces, and we have a really thriving and committed private sector, and particularly among the innovators, people that really want to solve these problems and are devoting their professional lives to creating the kind of tools that will enable us to be resilient and to endure future challenges. So, I think that is cause for optimism. I think the fact that we have a lot of great allies is cause for optimism. I think sometimes if you look at our adversaries, the relationships they have with their partners can tend to be more transactional. And,
Mm.
we have long-standing, deep partnerships with allies that, give us, I believe, long-term strength and resilience.
The Strategic Defence Review goes towards showing that resilience is becoming that real national and strategic priority, not just a technical one, not just something that companies like Device Authority have been thinking about for a while, how we can secure things, how we can, automate that, make it easier and safer for everyone. But it's now at the forefront of what this government's trying to do, and what the outside review is also trying to really pin down. And that's shift in mindset that will enable this lasting change, that our eyes have been opened with all the different kinds of warfare that include technology and cyber. It's really brought it to the forefront, and now it's become this strategic priority that enables the government to really take a really hard look at what's going on. Having an external review, not just an internal one carried out by the Defence Forces themselves, means that they're able to now take hold of those outside perspectives and take hold of the perspectives of people like yourself who are seeing startups like Device Authority and the others that you've invested in as well, who are working so hard to try and meet these needs created by change. So it's exciting.
Yeah, it is. It's an exciting time.
Thank you so much for joining me today. If you've been listening and you enjoyed the conversation that Grace and I have had today, please do subscribe to the podcast and make sure to share it with your network. Thank you for listening to this episode of The Authority On, a podcast brought to you by Device Authority. If you have any questions about the subject matter in this podcast, please head to the Device Authority website, deviceauthority.com. See you next time.